The emperor's order was clear. March and fight. Kusunoki Masashige knew what it meant. He had warned them. Now, at Sakurai, he stopped, turned to his young son, and said goodbye. Who was this man who chose duty over survival?
He knew he would die. Every general in the emperor's court agreed it was suicide. A small force against an unstoppable army. But Kusunoki Masashige had already decided. Not how to survive. How to say goodbye.
Japan in the 1330s was a land fracturing at its seams. The Kamakura shogunate, the military government that had ruled for over a century, was rotting from within. Into this chaos stepped Emperor Go-Daigo, determined to reclaim real power for the imperial throne. And rising alongside him was an unlikely commander from the mountains of Kawachi province, Kusunoki Masashige. Not a great lord, not a man of vast armies, but a strategist of near supernatural ingenuity, who would prove that the right mind could outfight almost any force sent against it. In 1331, the Kamakura shogunate sent thousands to crush the imperial uprising. Kusunoki retreated to Akasaka Castle, a fortress barely worthy of the name, with a few hundred men. He flooded the approaches. He set traps. He dropped boiling water and swinging logs on those who climbed the walls. When the castle finally fell, he disappeared into the mountains like smoke. Kamakura had deployed its full might against him. He had held them off for weeks. And now, he was already planning his next move.
2 years later, Kusunoki held Chihaya Castle, high in the mountains, for months, tying down the Kamakura armies long enough for other loyalist commanders to strike. In 1333, the shogunate collapsed. Emperor Go-Daigo returned from exile in triumph. The era called the Kenmu Restoration had begun. The first time in centuries that real power returned to the imperial throne. Kusunoki, the guerrilla commander from the mountains, now stood beside the man he had always believed was Japan's rightful ruler. Victory at last. But it would not last long.
The Kenmu Restoration was, in theory, everything Kusunoki had fought for. But governing proved harder than fighting. Emperor Go-Daigo's court rewarded its favorites poorly and alienated its most powerful allies. Ashikaga Takauji, the warrior whose defection from Kamakura had made the restoration possible, was growing restless. He had expected vast rewards and greater authority. Instead, the imperial court treated him with suspicion. By 1335, Takauji had had enough. He raised his banner against the very emperor he had helped restore. And suddenly, everything Kusunoki had built was at risk.
Takauji struck fast. He seized Kyoto, was driven out, sailed to Kishu, and returned with a force that dwarfed anything the emperor could field. By early 1336, Japan had split in two. The emperor held the mountain fortress at Yoshino. Takauji was marching east with tens of thousands. And from the sea, an Ashikaga naval force was sailing toward the imperial heartland. Kusunoki watched the horizon and understood exactly what was coming and what it would cost to stop it. Kusunoki laid out his plan before the Imperial Council with uncommon directness. Withdraw the Emperor to Mount Hiei. Let the Ashikaga advance. Stretch their supply lines. Then strike at night in the mountains, where numbers mean nothing. His kind of war. The court listened politely, then dismissed him. The nobles wanted a decisive battle, a visible victory. They would meet Takauji's forces head-on. Kusunoki left the chamber, knowing exactly what this meant. He had tried. He had been overruled. And he would now be ordered to fight a battle he could not win. The Imperial command was clear. March south to Hyogo and intercept Takauji's naval force before it landed. Kusunoki had perhaps 3,000 men. Takauji commanded many times that. Every officer who could read a map knew how this would end. Kusunoki bowed, accepted the order without protest, and left the throne room. Later, his closest advisors asked if he would disobey, flee, buy time, hide his forces. He looked at them as if the question made no sense. "The Emperor has spoken," he said. He was not performing loyalty. He had simply never conceived of any other choice. They marched south through summer heat. Kusunoki and his men toward a battle they knew was unwinnable. There is no record of despair in his ranks. The men who followed him had held castles they should have lost, survived ambushes and winters in the mountains. They trusted him the way soldiers trust a commander who has never lied to them. And Kusunoki had never lied. He had simply never told them that this time he had no plan that could save them. At a place called Sakurai, south of Kyoto, Kusunoki stopped. He called his eldest son, Masatsura, 11 years old, and led him aside from the column. He knelt, looked into the boy's face, and began to speak. He told him to return home, to survive, to serve the emperor faithfully after he was gone, to carry the Kusunoki name forward into whatever world remained. He did not offer false hope. He did not promise he would return. He simply told his son the truth, the way a man tells it when he has accepted what is coming. Masatsura refused. He was 11 years old, and he refused. He would not go home. He would march with his father. He would die with his father. Kusunoki took the boy by the shoulders and looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "That is not what I need from you," he said. "What I need is for you to live." Masatsura wept. The column waited. And then, slowly, the boy turned and began walking home. Kusunoki watched until he disappeared from sight. Then he turned south. and gave the order to march.
The Battle of Minatogawa began on a summer morning in 1336. Kusunoki's 3,000 faced Ashikaga Takauji's forces from the west and Tadayoshi's forces from the east simultaneously. The naval support he had been promised never arrived. From the beginning, he was encircled. What happened next stunned even his enemies. For half a day, Kusunoki's tiny force held, charging, retreating, reforming, fighting with a ferocity that made much larger armies give ground. His men did not fight like men trying to survive. They fought like men who had already made their peace.
But numbers are numbers. By afternoon, Kusunoki had been wounded multiple times. His forces were down to a fraction of their strength. He led what remained of his men in one final charge through the Ashikaga lines, not to escape, but to reach the farmhouse district near the river. There was no longer any battle to win. There was only the question of how a man like Kusunoki Masashige would choose to end things. And he had already decided that, too. Inside a farmhouse at Minatogawa, Kusunoki sat alone by a small lamp as the last of his guard took their positions outside. He was wounded in multiple places. The armor that had carried him through countless battles was damaged beyond repair. Through the paper screen, shadows moved, the Ashikaga forces closing in, methodical and inevitable. He had perhaps minutes left. He sat in the stillness, composed and present, and waited for his brother Masatsura to come to him. And when Masatsura arrived, he asked him a single question.
Brother, if you could be born again into this world, what would you wish for? Masatsura asked. And Kusunoki answered, I would be reborn 7 times, and 7 times I would strike down the enemies of the emperor. Shichi Sho Hokoku, 7 lives for the nation. Not despair, not bravado, something older. A declaration that his loyalty had no end, that death was only a pause before the next attempt. The brothers bowed to each other and died together as they had lived, on the same side to the last.
What set Kusunoki apart wasn't battlefield skill alone, although that was extraordinary. It was that he never confused loyalty with optimism. He didn't follow the emperor because he believed the emperor would win. He followed him because he believed the emperor was right. This is harder than it sounds. Most loyalty is contingent. It holds while victory seems possible. Kusunoki's was unconditional. And that quality, the willingness to serve without the expectation of surviving, is precisely what made his death something Japan could not forget.
Masatsura kept his promise. He grew up, fought for the southern court just as his father had, and died in battle at the age of 22, still serving the same cause. The Kusunoki story became Japan's most retold tale of faithful service. In the Meiji era, when Japan needed symbols of loyalty to the emperor, Kusunoki was elevated to near divine status. His image printed in school textbooks, his bronze statue placed at the entrance to the imperial palace in Tokyo, where it still stands today.
The Kusunoki story poses a question that has endured for 700 years. What is the value of loyalty that doesn't win? Japan's answer has always been the highest possible. Not because losing is noble, but because loyalty that requires a reward isn't really loyalty. It's a transaction. Kusunoki gave everything to a cause that failed in his lifetime, yet his name outlasted every man who defeated him. Sometimes what history remembers is not who won, but the quality of character that was present in the moment it mattered.
Next time on Samurai Chronicles, he served the shogun as a swordsmanship instructor, but his real weapon wasn't a blade. It was a philosophy that used the art of killing to illuminate the art of living. Yagyu Munenori, the samurai who wrote the book that still defines the Japanese martial tradition.
If this story moved you the way it has moved Japan for 7 centuries, subscribe for new episodes every day. Next time, we meet a man whose sword was never the point, Yagyu Munenori.